Democrats making a lot of noise in the House, promoting some far-left ideas. Newly elected Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez pushing a Green New Deal. It calls for meeting 100% of national power demand through renewable resources and retrofitting every residential and industrial building for state-of-the-art energy efficiency. It's not just about climate change. It also proposes a basic income program and universal health care, along with plans to put millions of workers on the taxpayer-funded government payroll. Liam Donovan is a National Review commentator, and Zach Friend is a Democratic strategist, and it's good to have you both here. I want you to take a quick listen to the 60 Minutes interview that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did last night.
What makes it unrealistic?
How to pay for it.
We pay more per capita in healthcare and education for lower outcomes than many other nations. And so for me, what's unrealistic is what we're living in right now.
And then this caught my eye this morning by Jarrett Stepman over at Heritage in the Daily Signal. He says that whatever one thinks about Ocasio-Cortez, it's undeniable that she can reach a large and growing subset of voters. Her every woman persona and ability to seem truly genuine is making her a potent voice on the left. So Liam Donovan, let me turn to you and ask you about this Green New Deal. You're going to hear a little bit more of that, and are Republicans prepared to push back?
Well, I think right now we don't need to know what this means. It's a warmed-over slogan. A lot of the ideas even are sort of things that have been out there for about a decade. They have yet to lay out how they're going to do this, how they're going to pay for it, and how this ambitious timeline is going to be met. Is it going to be more government mandates? Is it going to be putting more costs on the consumer? I think it's an open question. I think until we see that, we can't really critique it that well.
Zach, one of the things she said last night, too, was that, she gets asked all the time, well, how are you going to pay for it? But that no one questions how we would pay for something like a Space Force. Is that a good argument?
Well, I think that the biggest challenge for this is going to be when you want something this broad, how you are actually going to pay for it. And then the realistic side, how you're actually going to get something through both houses of Congress, especially a Senate that's not in favor of this and a president that would never sign this. But I do think from an ideological standpoint, if you're just sort of outlining some broad concepts that we're going to be hearing more about in the 2020 race, I think that this is an introduction to a lot of things you're actually going to hear on the campaign trail.
Well, and I'm wondering about that. Are Republicans, Liam, is a little bit unprepared to deal with, this new generation? They're younger, they have broader ideas about climate change and things like that, that maybe the Republicans need to brush up on their policy and their talking points.
Look, I think everybody agrees that we need to have more efficiency in energy, more innovation in energy, and the question is how to be there and what that government role is. But I think the other thing is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a phenom. She does have the ability to draw attention to subjects and policy matters that drive some important discussions, but she doesn't reflect where the median Democrat in the House is. The majority did not run through the Bronx. It ran through places like suburban Atlanta, Houston, Dallas. She does not represent the sort of members that are going to make the majority or break it in 2020.
That's a good point. And Zach, maybe you could talk about that a little bit because, in California, there are more Democrats representing now in the House from California than all other 36 states combined. And I'm just curious about the Democrats' plans to try to broaden that aperture a bit.
Well, I think that Liam raises a fair point. I mean, in order to win the presidential campaign, ultimately you're still going to need to win states, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, maybe Florida, North Carolina, that in and of themselves, it's unclear whether a message like this is the primary message that they would be interested in versus, say, a standard economic message. But the ideas themselves that are being presented really actually aren't that new. In 2008, when I worked for then Senator Obama running for president, we talked about a Green New Deal policy constantly, and in fact, it was a large part of his energy independence plan. So these ideas aren't new. I think packaging it all together into something this broad is pretty significant. But I think that climate change is an issue that you're going to hear a lot more about on the 2020 campaign. I think similar to some of the healthcare arguments that she's making, how it translates to a general election as opposed to just a base-based interest is unclear.
I am curious, Liam, how Republicans will continue to try to claim the mantle of fiscal responsibility. No one is talking about any sort of entitlement reform anymore. We know that's what's eating up most of the budget. We know there's ways to do that would be responsible. But the Republicans aren't really talking about that anymore. And yet, they'll say they scoff at $32 trillion for Medicare for all. But, are they vulnerable on this point?
it does make it difficult to push back on some of these things, talking on both sides of your mouth. It's a lot easier to be a fiscal hawk when you're not in charge of the purse strings. So I think it is a challenge for Republicans. They'll have to come up with that positive agenda that does demonstrate the fiscal responsibility that they've talked about.
Zach,